A warm welcome from Fotografiska Thailand, and thank you for joining us for this live tour. For those of you who have not yet met me, then my name is Elo, and I will be your guide tonight. And I know that a lot of you have been missing this wonderful view. We hope we can change that very soon, and until we do, please join us for this live tour. Welcome. In the beginning of March, we opened here the exhibition Exposed by Bryan Adams, and only to learn barely a week later that we have to close our doors. So not many of you got to visit and see this exhibition, and this is the reason why we're bringing it to you in your homes virtually now. But before we get started, there's just a few things I want to mention what you will be in for tonight. So we'll approximately have about an hour and a half of full insights into Bryan Adams' photography. I will be joined by Anke Degenhardt, who is the curator of this exhibition, and will also have 3 guests to join us throughout the tour. And last but not least, we really would like to hear your questions, and these you can submit to us through the Slido app. So please do that, and we'll be happy to answer them. And if you do like this tour, then you are welcome to support us and buy the online ticket for it. And we also wanted to give you something back. So if you purchase the online ticket for this tour, then this will grant you free access as soon as we have actually opened our doors once again. But now I would like to welcome Anke. Can you hear us, Anke?
Yes, I can.
Perfect. Welcome. How are you?
I'm very well, and thanks Ilo and Maya and the whole Fotografiska team to make that happen tonight for everybody. Very exciting for me. It's the first time I'm doing that. Of course, working from home like kind of nearly everybody. So can't wait to have you guide us with my little help through the wonderful exhibition by Bryan Adams.
Thank you. And in addition to you being together with Matthew Humphrey, the curator of this exhibition Exposed, you also work closely with other artists. And I would maybe mention here Alison Jackson, as not too long ago we also had her exhibition here. So can you maybe shed a bit of light of what is your role in the art world? What is what you do?
Okay, happy to do that. You will have, I think Fotografiska Thailand will have another artist we are working with, which is Martin Scheller, coming soon, hopefully. I'm an art consultant and curator. And here, because it is all about Bryan Adams tonight, I'm working with Bryan Adams, I think, since 14 years now. On his exhibitions when it comes to galleries, museum, and all his books by style.
That's nice. So 14 years, that is a long time. Can you tell us how did your collaboration start? Because you're also friends. So which was first? Was it friendship before business or business before friendship?
Nice question. Thank you. I'm giving an award in Germany since 24 years called the Lead Award. And Bryan won his first one 14 years ago for Mickey, a portrait he did on Mickey Rourke, a photo I think Elo Yun will be talk later on the tour about. And we met, and the next day he called me and said, Anke, why don't we work together and you curate all my shows and do my books? To make a long story short, it was really direct and quick, and of course that's since we work together.
And now shall we talk a little bit about this particular exhibition, The Exposed? Do you want to explain us how did this idea come about?
Okay, everybody knows Bryan as a rock star, and a lot of people now got to know him as well as a famous photographer. What we see in Tallinn is like kind of best of Bryan Adams. His portraits open for me a window into contracting worlds that range from celebrities and glamour to trauma and hardship, and all in his own handwriting. And that's what everybody can see now in the tour we are giving, but hopefully very soon when it's reopening, alive in Tallinn.
We hope so too. But without any further ado, let's get started. And I particularly like the way that this exhibition starts, because to me, it looks like a beautiful, very intimate, non-verbal dialogue between Bryan Adams and his mother. So can you tell us, was that Bryan's idea or?
No, I think Bryan was very surprised when we curated it the way it is hanging now. That those photos Bryan took for a charity exhibition for a Canadian museum. So him from the back and Jane Clark, his mother, who is a very famous Canadian painter herself. And I mean, it was like when Bryan said being like very young, like I think he was like 16, and he decided, I want to become a very famous rock star. And I have to say, Jane Clark, his mother, she supported him from the first moment on. And it's not that easy to take like a 16-year-old of school and trust him and read your own boy and say, okay, he will make his own life and he will become a very famous rock star. So, and I thought it's nice to get upstairs your stairs and see the introduction of the whole exhibition, and see Bryan from the back and Mama Jane from the front. So Bryan was surprised, but he liked it when he saw it first time.
I remember him joking at the press conference here that this is his better side here on the photo. So he's not too happy about being photographed himself.
He looks good from both sides, I know.
But it's interesting you mentioned the project with famous Canadians, and it really seems that Bryan himself is quite happy and honored about his heritage. And this particular project that he did goes quite a long way back and actually came together in the exhibition and also a book in 2017 when Canada, I believe, celebrated its 150th anniversary. And throughout this exhibition as well, we will see quite a few famous Canadians. So this is not going to be the last one that we touch upon.
That's true.
And now to, as you mentioned also, Bryan being a famous rock star, then it would be really well suited to go to another famous rock star. And this is Mick Jagger, obviously. And I think a lot of us have seen thousands and thousands of photos of him. Yet, when I look at this one, it somehow stands out and it has a lot of emotion and a lot of sort of kind of self-confidence. So how does Bryan get these people that have been photographed so many times before from a different angle and still manages to shoot something new?
I mean, for Bryan, it's kind of easy. He meets a lot of people. I mean, people like Mick Jagger. I mean, they're neighbors, and they have the same like profession. Like, you know, beside Bryan being a photographer, a famous one, he's a famous musician like Mick Jagger. So they kind of meet on an eye level, but Bryan has something which is very special. He's able to build trust like immediately, and you can feel the openness between him and his subject immediately, you know.
And I think this you can really see from these different photos, because when we move from here, there are so many famous artists, musicians and actors, and they all seem so relaxed on their photos, although yes, they've been photographed many, many times, but you can feel this being on an eye level, like you mentioned as well. And now when we move on to this next photo, then I often joke, and I joke with you as well, that probably one actor that we could make a complete solemn exhibition about would be Sir Ben Kingsley. So can you tell us what is Bryan's fascination with him?
I mean, Bryan is a big fan of real people, real characters, and he is searching in his photos about the nature of celebrities and the fragility beneath their faces. And you can see that was a good dialogue. And I mean, we have, I think, 5 photos of Ben Kingsley in the exhibition in Tallinn at the moment, because they worked together very well, you know. But also Ben Kingsley, he knows how to present himself.
And I think when we talked about how Bryan manages to really make people feel so relaxed and confident, then it becomes very essential when he set out his attentions to actually photograph something that is much more delicate, so to speak. And this is the next project, which is called Homeless. So he set out to photograph people that have gone through a very difficult life situation, and they've ended up being homeless.
This is a project he started 6 years ago. Bryan was approached by Trudy Styler to photograph the feature of the homeless in London, and that was for a magazine called The Big Issue, which was produced or is produced by professional photographers and journalists. It is sold by the homeless people in the streets to provide them with legitimate income and, let's say, facilitate their reintegration into the mainstream society.
And when I look at this collage behind me, the collection of the different photos of homeless people, then there's something that really strikes out. And that is that on quite a few of those photos, we see the people without their shirts. So what was the intention behind the idea?
Yes, there is a reason for that. First is Bryan wanted us to see the tan line, and second also to see the proof of brutality of their hard life on the street, visible scars, and if we look careful, you also see a lot of invisible traumas here, I think.
This is really, and it's what is interesting is that this is the first time that this series is actually positioned in an exhibition, because before it was just showed in the book, but never in an exhibition.
Yeah, this is the first time we're showing the complete body of work, and I think we were all very touched. It's different when Bryan always said, it takes a long way to bring it to a museum, all the stuff. So he has to organize the shooting, he has to do it, then he has to select the work, and then we have to print it and frame it and ship it. So, and then when you see it, we all had goosebumps when we saw it first time hanging on the wall, and it's such an important work at the moment.
And I think that the way that this exhibition has been built up, it really emphasizes these different bodies of works, because when you come from a world of celebrities into a very different reality that is very harsh, it creates even a higher and a bigger contrast, and it really, I think, delivers the idea. And now we are once again returning back to the world of celebrities. And before we do that, I would actually like to welcome a very loved and internationally recognized Estonian audiovisual artist, Kerli. Hello, Kerli, can you hear us?
Yes. Can you hear me?
Welcome. We can hear you perfectly. Hi, and thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
So the reason why we wanted to invite you and talk about Bryan's works is because you, as an artist yourself, can shed a bit of light. What does an artist want to show through photography? And is it really all about fame and glory when we talk about celebrities?
As we were actually discussing before, the kind of like what would make an artist use all these different mediums, right? Bryan's story is really interesting. He's a musician, he's a visual artist and all that. And I think it just kind of like first comes down to like necessity oftentimes when you're starting to, change your mediums around, and you're with people that are doing great things and you're inspired by that, and kind of like just opens your eyes to what's possible. And somebody who's like a really sensitive person would also I think it just starts like all blending into the same thing, the lights, the shapes, the sounds, all of that.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And when we discussed with you, then we chose two photos that you particularly liked. And maybe we can start with the first one, which is of Amy Winehouse, who actually was also a dear friend to Bryan Adams and has a very tragical story to herself. And this also shows a bit of this other side, the darker side to the celebrity world and life, and something that we often kind of forget about maybe.
Yeah, we live in a society that glorifies fame, but to be honest, I think fame can definitely be a very toxic thing. It can destroy people. Fame requires really good mental health, really good support system, and also like separating yourself from that idea or that illusion, that comes with fame. And you kind of like can almost become like a puppet where people love to see you rise and fall and like the whole drama of it, So it's really sad to see celebrities being dehumanized, and that just kind of like amplifying their mental illnesses. And Amy being one of the many very tragic stories.
Yes, and these photos are very dear to Bryan as well, because the viewers have seen that Bryan has actually photographed Amy so many times on several occasions, and it started out first as just one photo shoot, and they became friends, and so he continued shooting her in different series. But to continue from here, the next two photos that we chose together, when I saw them first, it really, really made me think of you somehow. And I would actually leave it to you to introduce this, in a good way, crazy duo to our viewers. This is Die Antwoord. And Gerli, can you tell us who they are and why do you particularly like these photos?
Die Antwoord is a South African rap group. But in my opinion, they're so much more than a rap group. They're also visual artists. And actually they are, I don't know if they are anymore, but they're a couple in real life. And they have actually an adult child. So it's really cool, the world they've created. They've basically taken this like South African underbelly, like I would say an equivalent to a trailer park in the US or like Lasnamäe in Estonia. They've taken that South African underbelly and kind of like synthesized it and glorified it and made it cool. And as we were discussing this art, I actually took down Yolandi's, they call it Sef. So I took down Yolandi's quote of what is Sef? You're poor, but you're fancy. You're poor, but you're sexy. You got style. So it's basically, I guess, their message as well is of self-empowerment and just owning it, whatever you are.
And it's interesting because when you look at these two photos, and even without knowing the group or the duo, you can pretty much get the message across because it's a very strong photo, both of them. And is that something that an artist would always yearn for in a photo or in a photo session, to bring that message across without, needing to say too much?
Yeah, I guess visually you are always kind of looking for those moments that like either capture your essence or capture the essence or the energy of what you're trying to portray. So these photos I really love personally because I love the sleek, clean aesthetic. And it's almost like the gritty parts really get to shine in this like clean environment. So yeah, I love these photos.
Thank you so much for sharing a little bit of your insights of what it feels to be an artist and why it's so important to deliver messages through photography as well. And so we can let you go, Gerli, now, and hopefully Anke will join us back for this next photo that is actually a part of a larger series. And here we can see Mickey Rourke, and this is the photo that we mentioned before, the series that received in 2006 the Lead Award. And Anke, I would really like you to open up the story behind this photo shoot a little bit and maybe explain a bit more why this series was so well loved and why this story comes across so well.
Okay, I'll first we'll tell everybody a little behind the scenes secret story. I hope that Rochester will tell people.
Please do.
Not listening to us tonight. Okay, this whole photo shooting, which got in 2006 the Lead Award, an award I'm giving. That's why when I met Bryan Adams first, that was taken in the Dorchester Hotel in London. And this is a very glamorous, beautiful old hotel and has the biggest carpet in the world, and no dogs are allowed. So Mickey Rourke came with his little funny dog, and he said he's very well educated, so he's not doing any harm to anything. And of course, on that carpet, which we see now, the first thing he did, he peed on it. So, okay, I think nobody really realized, and the team cleaned it, of course. This portrait, the reason why it got the whole series, the lead award was, you can see in a couple of photos a familiar face, Mickey Rourke, a familiar face from the world of entertainment, but you can see the fragility and, as I always feel, a bit of sadness beneath the facade of him. So when I see that, and I met him 2 times, one was in Los Angeles because I went boxing with him, which is like really many years ago, and he came to Bryan's opening of his museum show in Moscow a while ago, and I mean, it's when you see the photography, you think you need to hug him, but when you see him in real life, of course, he adds like his movements and everything. But I think Bryan really catched the real, the fragility behind the facade, and I think that's why we gave him the prize for that in 2006.
Yes, and as well for me, when I saw the series of Mickey, then it was a completely different side to him, because him being a former boxer, we sort of have an image of him which is nothing what we see in these photos, and it must be hard to capture this kind of vulnerability, and so there's no wonder that this series was highly recognized. And so for the next 2 photos, we really wanted to bring in someone that knows portrait photography and can tell us from that point of view. So I would like to welcome Anton Suksdorf from Finland joining us. Are you there, Anton?
I'm here. Hello.
Hi, nice to have you. How are you? How is life?
I'm good, thank you. Thank you. I'm at home in my living room.
Sounds good. So first tell me, what does a photographer, especially a portrait photographer, do when there's no one to portrait?
Well, at the moment I'm working on a series of portraits taken via FaceTime. And the portraits are of chefs from all around the world who's sitting at home while their restaurants are being closed due to the virus. And what I find interesting with this project is that it's a completely new way of taking a portrait, at least for me, because normally a sitting is quite personal and intimate between the subject and the photographer, and these two are physically at the same place creating the portrait together. And now that I'm in Helsinki and my subjects are, for example, in Brazil, the traditional ways of creating a portrait doesn't obviously apply. So the distance between me and the subject sets new ways of working, which I find really interesting and also challenging at the same time. And as a photographer, I think I can learn quite a lot from this project because it forces me to think differently and use new methods to get the portraits done.
But this sounds really interesting, and we really look forward to that project. So good luck with that.
Thank
but
you. Thank
now,
you.
when we talk about this dynamics between the photographer and the person being photographed, then let's start with this next very, I would say, mystic and intriguing portrait. And I would actually first start with a question: can that even be considered as a portrait? Because you can hardly even see the lady.
Yes, I definitely consider a portrait, and I think actually it's a really good one. I like it a lot, and there's many reasons why I like this portrait. First of all, the visual approach is very clear and stylish, which I like, and it reminds me a lot of Avedon's work, which is a big inspiration for me. And then secondly, the fact that we can't really see Atwood's face forces the viewer to think and therefore somehow react when looking at the picture. And our first thought is probably why? Why is her face covered? Why is the scarf there? Why can't we see her at all? And then we decide, do we like it or not? And if we like it or not doesn't really matter anymore, because the portrait has already done what is probably the most important thing a photograph can do, which is to create a reaction within the viewer. And this is something I always wish my own photography would do, to raise reactions and opinions, feelings. So it's not just something you look at and then move forward, but you actually stop and think about it. And also the use of a white background for these portraits is a very good choice. There are no elements of distraction that draw the viewer's attention away from the subject. So all the focus is aimed at the person being portrayed in the image. And I think that's one of the main things with the portrait, that you actually look at who's there.
And it becomes especially symbolic because the viewer already saw that the person being portrayed here is Margaret Atwood, who is a very known Canadian writer and a poet and an activist, and we mainly know her by her writing. For example, she's the author behind the bestsellers like The Maiden's Tale and The Testaments. And it's interesting to see that Bryan chose not to show her. So it somehow even emphasizes more this portrait. But now moving on from Margaret Atwood to the next photo that is one of my favorites in this show is, of course, of Her Majesty. And I think it's particularly interesting to have you comment on that photo, because you yourself, you have photographed so many heads of states. For example, you've done photos of Tarja Halonen, Niinistö, and the presidents of Finland. So can you shed a bit of light, first of all, how does one photograph someone that is, in a high position politically? And is it somehow different from photographing anyone else?
Well, often when photographing, for example, head of states, you're not given much time at all. It's literally a few minutes and you just have to make it work within that time. And that is also often the case regarding the location where you shoot. It can be a corridor or a small room where there's good light or bad light or no light at all, but you just somehow have to do it. So if both time and space are decided in advance for you, you might, as a photographer, ask yourself that, what is your input? And for me, it's the energy between the subject, the camera, and myself, the photographer.
And I think this photo really, I haven't seen a photo as sincere as this one of Her Majesty. And I think this is also one of the reasons why this became such an iconic photo. And Anke will tell us later a little bit of the backstory to this photo. But I think really, like you said, it emphasizes this kind of energy or dynamics that the photographer is able to create with, so to speak, the subject. Yeah.
Definitely. I think this photograph of the Queen is an excellent portrait because she's portrayed in a way you rarely seen before, quite relaxed and unofficial and easily approachable. And here the photographer managed to do what is so often expected by a photographer, to make someone or something look really good and desirable. And when photographing someone that has been in front of the camera 1,000 times, you as a photographer have to make an important decision early on in the process, that will you portray this person in a way he or she has been seen before, or will you maybe try something different? And in this image, I think it's pretty clear that the photographer wanted something different. Obviously, it's a much more demanding route to take because, you might end up with a disaster, but you might also end up with something new, creative and brilliant, which I think happened in this case. And however, the final image is never just the photographer's vision. It's an outcome of a joint effort. And this joint effort is very visible here in the Queen's portrait. You can tell that she's giving something of herself, something personal to the photographer that's then captured on film. And this is the main reason I really like it. It feels real and it's personal, and it captures a moment between two human beings.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And I'll have Anke shortly tell us the story behind this photo. But I want to just say thank you, Anton, for joining us and sharing your insight.
Thank you for having me. It was really nice.
Pleasure. So Anke, are you there to tell us the story behind
Yes.
behind this photo?
also, I'd like to thank Anton for describing everything. Very well done. I couldn't have done it better, but I'm here to give a bit of the behind the scenes secret. Let me start. Bryan, like a lot of other famous photographers, have been invited to make a portrait of the Queen for her jubilee. And for example, Annie Leibovitz was invited to, and she wanted to do the official photograph, and then she did a big mistake, and she asked the Queen to take off the crown, and she said, "I'm not doing that," and she left the room. So Bryan's photo, like the official one, was already taken, and then they got out of the official room where the photograph was taken, and past that little stairway, and Bryan realized the chair and the rubber boots, and he asked her Majesty and said, "Can you sit down?" And then she, of course, realized that the rubber boots were next to her, and Bryan said, "There are the rubber boots next to you. You can see them because they will be on the photo." And she said, "Yes." And a big smile was in her face. And it's very rare that you can have the Queen photograph next to rubber boots, I think. But this photograph, I mean, her smiling in such a sweet way, I think we have never seen it before like that. This photograph ended up as a official stamp.
That's brilliant. Thank you for sharing that story. And now we've actually reached to the third part of this exhibition, and another emotional transition is about to occur. This particular part is called Wounded: The Legacy of War. And I would say that this series is just as much about war as it is about being anti-war. And it's very similar to James Nachtwey's approach to war. And James Nachtwey's exhibition was in this very space before Bryan Adams' exhibition. And for this series, I would actually like Jan Broman to join us. And Jan, together with his brother Per Broman, were the two founders of Fotografiska Stockholm almost now 10 years ago. So Jan, are you there to join us?
I'm here. Thank you for having me.
A pleasure.
And thank you for organizing this great tour.
You're very welcome. So we know that people always like to watch beautiful photos of other people. They like to feel somehow related, and they like to enjoy and feel the emotions. And now with this part of the exhibition, we've reached somewhere and to a point where none of us really wants to relate to. So why would you think it's important to tell these stories through photography, although they're quite painful and even sometimes hard to watch?
I think that is one of the mission with photography has always been to tell us the stories we really don't want to see, and we really don't want to be in that situation. And photography has sort of always been there for us and telling us the stories. And I think the new generation of photographers like Bryan Adams, which is a fantastic photographer in the fashion and celebrities and portraits and whatever, but he's also doing fantastic portrait of this brave people which has been in war, and telling their stories and telling the world that it is not the end, it's still with dignity. And compared to James, which is totally the opposite, he's been sort of always in the center of the action and telling us the story about what's happening all around the world when it's in a conflict. And that is the power of photography, I would say. That's the greatest power of photography, to tell us these stories and give us the sort of this documentation, these stories.
And when did you yourself become acquainted with Bryan Adams' photography?
I don't remember if it was at the camera work in Berlin or if it was Anke who presented Bryan's work for me first time. I don't remember, but I was just blown away with his sort of capacity to do sort of this beautiful, very rich portraits, but at the same time doing this really serious with wounded people, but also the people on the street. So it's I was blown away because we all know that he's a fantastic musician, but that he's also a world-class photographer. That was a new thing for me.
Well, thank you, Jan, so much for joining us and giving a bit of insight from, let's say, from Fotografiska and from also the side that is very important for Fotografiska to bring these relevant matters to the awareness of the people.
It's a very, very important part of what we do, try to inspire a more conscious world. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. And so here we continue with the series, and The Wounded tells the story of British servicemen and women who have suffered life-changing injuries throughout their service and also in training. And maybe, Anke, you can join me and tell a little bit about how this series became and how did Bryan do this series? What was the process behind it?
Okay, there was some years ago. I'm always bad with numbers. Let's say 6 or 8 years ago, there was a wonderful journalist called Karen Froggatt. She came to Bryan's studio in London and asked him if he would be interested in photographing wounded soldiers coming back from Afghanistan, British ones, and for a calendar. And we all thought it's not appropriate to make a calendar with them, but we thought Bryan immediately said it's really important to show the visible scars and the million private conflicts these people have to a brighter audience. So we worked so he started photographing them. He invited them to come to his studio in London, bring relatives like families like mothers, brothers, fathers, children, because it's not about what you see, the pain you see these people have. It's like about the conflicts, the pain the whole family, the relatives have as well. Bryan's father was used to say, "A man is not an island." That means you're connected with the world, with the family, I mean, the photos he produced were. Photos sometimes were heartwarming, sometimes humorous, as you see here, they have a bit of a humor. But it shows the bitter aftermath of warfare as well as extraordinary courage. And I have to say, I met most of them. We had a book signing in the National Gallery in London some years ago, and I met all of them, most of them, I have to say. And even if I always have the feeling I know them because I had exhibited them for Bryan in different museums around the world, I couldn't sleep the whole night, because how can these people stand that, can stand the pain, live a life after that, So, and I think for Bryan, this is one of the projects, the most important projects he had ever photographed. That's how he feels about that.
I liked how you mentioned that there was even a bit of humor to this bitter aftermath of warfare, and maybe to just tell the viewers as well a bit of these stories. For example, the Corporal Rory Mackenzie, his story was quite humorous in the sense that when he walked into the studio and then Bryan asked, "So what is your story?" And then the Corporal said, "Well, I'm missing one leg." And then Bryan said, "Would you be okay to show me?" And then the Corporal dropped his pants, saying that not every day do you get to drop your pants in front of Bryan Adams. So it's amazing how these people still manage to, take life joyfully, although most of us can't even imagine these stories that they've been through and these experiences that they've lived through. And this really comes across in the book, Wounded, where all of these people that he has photographed also share their stories. And for example, the next one was particularly heartbreaking for me. This year is the Lance Corporal Martin Campton, and his story is very harsh, like all of these stories, but he suffered severe burns as he was ambushed in a convoy, and it was particularly sad to hear that just 4 months before he went, he actually met his at the time girlfriend, who now has become his wife, Michelle, and to just come back from an experience like that, it's so important to have the people stand next to you and support you throughout this, because otherwise it couldn't be bearable. And then here we see another photo that is also actually on the cover of the book Wounded, and this is of Corporal Ricky Ferguson. And Ricky also received the military cross from the Queen, and this story was heartwarming because when the Queen herself gave Ricky the military cross, then she put it around his neck and said, "Thank you for your service." And then all that Ricky actually responded was, "I was just doing my job." And it's really, these stories are heartbreaking. And now probably we're moving on to probably the hardest photograph that Bryan has had to take so far in his career, because this is of a boy who was, at the time when he was injured, only 18 years old. And this is the rifleman Craig Wood on this photo here. And Craig had shown up to the photo shoot together with his father. And that was a moment when Bryan said to me that this is where he broke down. And he just couldn't deal with the rush of emotions that came over him. And he actually had to step aside, and he asked also the boy's father to step aside with him. And as they were trying to gather their emotions, they realized that that was the moment where they had to be strong for that boy. And he had still all of this joy in him and willingness to live and carry on. So it's amazing, these stories that the people have shared in this book. And now, like I said, it's an emotional transition all throughout this exhibition. We're moving once again back now to the world of spotlight and magazines and beauty. And for these last images, I would like you, Anke, to also share the stories behind. And maybe we can start with Caroline Vreeland's photo over here, which sort of, to me, looks like a critique about today's beauty cult. And is quite an intriguing one. So can you tell us, was that the idea behind the photo?
I think it's a very contemporary fashion photo of somebody being naked and not being naked. I mean, in the former times, like Helmut Newton, I worked with him a lot. He had put everybody in, like, let's say, La Perla lingerie. And now in the times of Kardashians, this is a different style of underwear, I have to say. I mean, she's naked and not being naked, and a bit like slim fit underwear, I don't know. So this is like a document of time, I would say, a fashion document of time and underwear.
And the next one here, also these photos really different from the other ones that we've seen from the celebrities, because they become more artsy and really feel like they've just been taken from a photo magazine, which they, by the way, often have been from the Zoo magazine. And when we now move to this one, Boy George, I think our audience can hardly recognize Boy George from this photo, although he's quite a known British singer-songwriter. But in this particular photo, he has a lot of costume and was designed by Jean-Paul Gaultier, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, you're right. This photo was taken, of Boy George was taken for Zoo magazine. It's a magazine Bryan has co-founded with Sander Lubbe, and it's a perfect outlet for Bryan, I have to say, to show the world people and stories he's interested in. Because he doesn't have to wait that somebody comes and asks him to do something. He can decide, and then they produce it. And this was a teamwork, because Boy George, of course, loves hair. He's a good friend of Jean-Paul Gaultier, the French fashion designer, who just decided, like a month ago, I think, to stop working as in his business, and we all know, like, thinking of the past and Boy George and his music and his makeup, but he always had funny hats, so they created that all together, and I think it's tells a lot about him, and it's just like a portrait and also a fashion story.
Definitely, and it really is an intriguing photo and makes you think of all those crazy things. To me, it really reminds me of Alice in Wonderland and the Mad Hatter, etc. Yeah.
Paradise Burmese, you can can see it here in a way.
Exactly. And now we're moving to the last photo of our tour. And of course, as Estonians, we could not leave out this one. And here you can see a photo from 2011 by Bryan Adams, of course. And he photographed Kaarem and Kass, who's probably the most famous Estonian, as you know as well.
Yes, I heard about that.
And I wanted to ask you, because you've been a model yourself, and it's always intriguing because models know exactly how to pose, which way, you know, which is their better side, etc. So how does Bryan still manage to bring out this je ne sais quoi of every person, even if it's a very experienced model? He still somehow finds an angle that is intriguing and brings out this mystery.
Yeah, I mean, it's again about building trust. I mean, like for shootings like that, this is a commercial fashion shooting. There is a client behind, and so like the model and the photographer, Bryan Adams, they know what they have kind of, let's say, to deliver. But on the other hand, it's also that like Bryan is always good for a big surprise, and he catches moments in between. Like he sees little accidents when somebody is not moving or behaving the way it is like supposed to be, appropriate, whatever. So, but this is a very beautiful, just classic fashion photo, I think, with Carmen.
Thank you, and I can't believe we've already come to the end of our photos and to the end of the tour. But we do still have we were very quick, but we do have a very interesting and important part now. We have received quite a lot of questions from our lovely viewers, and I think this would be the perfect moment to take them. So I have them here, so I will pose them.
May you allow me to say some last sentence about Bryan's work?
Of course, please do.
On my side, to be able to finish the tour. For me, it's important, like working with Bryan for a long time. Heart is in the center of everything Bryan Adams does. If it's music, if it's photography, if it's his humanitarian work, his dedication to animal rights or climate protections. I think that's really important that people realize that, you know, he has all those layers, and it was, I mean, I hang all the exhibition with this gorgeous team you have there in Tallinn, and but I think and it was really exciting to go with everybody. All the other people talking about Bryan's photography through the exhibition today, but I really hope that you will be able to reopen it again very soon, and that the people are able to physically go and see it, because it is an add-on, you know. And the good news which Maya just shared with me is that you are able to delay it until autumn 2020, which is fantastic. Thank you.
We have to thank you as well, because we were really excited to hear this news, and I couldn't agree more. I mean, we're doing this live tour to bring this art closer to you, but nothing will substitute you coming to this gallery and actually experiencing it yourself. Plus, we haven't covered nearly even half of the works that we have here. So we really want people to come and see them. Point. Yeah. But now you're very welcome. On to the questions that we've received. And the first one I found quite intriguing. How has Bryan Adams's work evolved since he started with it? Because he's been at it for over 20 years, right?
Almost. I mean, a big change is, of course, I mean, he started when he was very young, of course, to do a first album cover. And of course, now he has more options when it comes to technique and people he wants to photograph. But also the other way around is it's now that a lot of people, like if it's celebrities or magazines or commercial clients, they ask him if he wants to photograph for them. So I think that is the biggest change for him. And he does a lot of commercial jobs as well.
Thank you. The next one, I think you already covered in your conclusion, but maybe it's really worth to state it out one more time. The question goes: is there a common ground that unites those 3 photo series together? And that's a good question for you as a curator as well.
Yeah, it's just that we want to show in this. This is kind of the best of Bryan Adams' exhibition, like everything he has done in the last 16, 18, 20 years. So we curated what we think is best of at the moment. It might look different in a year because, of course, he's constantly photographing, and but that's what it is about at the moment.
And that actually brilliantly brings us to the third question, which says, please give us a sneak peek into what is Bryan Adams' next photography project.
Oh, okay, that's a good question. Let me quickly think about it.
If you are allowed to elaborate, yeah.
No, I hope so. You will not kill me. Bryan is, of course, always working on different projects because he is full of energy. I mean, he's one of the persons in the world I know. He has the most energy. But there is a project, and I hope I can just tell a bit about that. Which seems to be very special for him, and he's working on, is about elderly people. But even I haven't seen anything so far.
That also seems very intriguing. Can't wait for this to be, shared with the public as well. That's really nice. But thank you, Anke. I really wanted to say one more time, thank you so much to you, and of course to all of our 3 guests that participated throughout the tour. And most of all, of course, thank you to our dear viewers. Without you, we wouldn't be doing this either. And as Anke, you mentioned, we're excited to tell everyone that we will be extending this exhibition. So hopefully once we open the doors, you do get to come in again and experience this, as it is really worth experiencing in real life. And as a small bonus, as I mentioned before, if you wanted to support us and purchase an online ticket for this live tour, then we wanted to also add on something from our side, and this ticket will actually serve as a free entry for all of you, so that you can come and experience this, like I said, as soon as we've opened our doors. So thank you one more time for joining us, and we really hope to see you very soon. Thank you.
Thank you, Ilo.
Thank you, Anke.